This morning's guest will be painless. Meet him, coming up next on Carolina People. Good morning. Welcome to Carolina People. This morning we're in the Harry Hartshorn Reading Room of the Elizabeth Maddox Chapin Library on the Grand Strand campus of Horry Georgetown Technical College. We're focused on medicine, and we're visiting with the Director of Medical Affairs at Grand Strand Regional Medical Center, Dr. John Charles. Good morning, Dr. Charles. This is a long stretch even for us at 7 a.m.
We're lucky
over here.
We've got 44-inch
a little bit extra. Yeah. That's right. I think yours is a little farther than mine.
Maybe
a little farther than mine.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Even more exciting, the library doesn't open for another 45 minutes, but they gave us the opportunity to get in a little early, and I think it was very cool. You saw something of a familiar side when you walked into the library this morning.
Right. The first thing I saw when I walked in, Greg, was a portrait of Elizabeth Maddox Chapin, and even from across the room I recognized it as one of my mother's portraits. And she was a portrait artist and has done quite a few portraits like that of historical figures off of sets of photographs, and they're hanging in various libraries and lobbies and things of that nature.
Sure.
And I had never seen this one before, but I recognized it just as her work.
And then you verified that coming up a little closer and seeing her initials and your last name there.
You bet.
On there. Even more in an additional exciting aspect here on the wall there behind our director is a portrait of Harry Hartshorn, who's a close friend of your dad's, I believe, and involved with Harry Love and your dad and helping to establish the...
Harry Hartshorn and Harry Love and my father, who's also named Harry, were instrumental in putting together the funding for the Burroughs and Chapin Springmaid Villa Art Museum. So we're very proud of that.
Absolutely, a beautiful facility there, and they had that party last year, a couple of years ago, to honor the three Harrys as a great reminder that it takes a lot of dedicated volunteers like those three guys and so many others, the Chapin Foundation and groups that really make it happen to make something like that come together.
And it was an interesting thing. There was a stretch of several years where, you know, the building was in decay and nothing was going anywhere, and it really required from those three a lot of perseverance and a sense of not giving up when it looked grim.
Absolutely. Those early years, we heard about it that night at that celebration. John, about yourself, are you originally from the Myrtle Beach area?
No, Greg, I was born in Florence.
Oh, good.
But my dad was in the military. He was born and raised in Florence, but joined the military as a JAG officer in the Air Force.
Right.
And so I did not grow up in the PD. I was just born there. And when I finished my military service 18 years ago, we moved here, and my parents had been living here for about 15 years at that time.
Right, since 74, you said.
Right, yeah.
Am I correct that you married a Florence area native as well?
Yeah, it is very unusual. You know, you're born in one town, and then you grow up in France and Japan and New Jersey and all these places. The last thing you anticipate is to marry the daughter of one of your dad's high school friends. So it was that's very an odd coincidence. But, my father-in-law is Ed Young.
Right,
of course, one of our congressmen back in the early 70s. And I was in college, and my dad called me up and said, you know, Ed Young is up here, and he's coming out to our house for dinner once a week, because they were living in Washington. My parents were. And I want you to go ahead and he's got a daughter just your age, and she's going to your college, and I want you to call her up and take her out.
Yeah.
Well, I said, well, fat chance of that. I choose my own dates.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not going to go on an obligatory date.
Right.
So I ignored he called several times. I ignored it, and then I went home to Washington for the summer and worked a construction job, what I usually did. And one day I was sitting out on the front porch before supper, and my dad pulls up and out steps this gorgeous young lady who stole my heart immediately.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And she had gone up there to work the summer as well, and so my dad had surreptitiously gone and snatched her and brought her out for dinner.
I love it.
Without warning anybody.
Sounds like my dad. That's great.
Yeah.
Yes, without any warning. Yeah, even better.
Caught me by surprise.
Even better, and it's worked out into a long marriage there. And of course, y'all are now the parents of three, proud parents of three.
Yeah, yeah, wonderful kids. I don't know what we did, but they turned out well.
Yeah, outdid yourself. Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, when we think about medicine, of course, a lot of folks wonder who is capable of talking about medicine, because medicine's so broad. You've covered, unlike a specialist who may just do one thing, you've had a broad range there during your medical career.
Right, Greg. You know, emergency medicine, we cover the whole waterfront on medicine. We may not go very deeply into any given topic. I mean, I know a heart attack when I see it,
right.
But I may not know how to take care of heart disease over the long period. But
right.
so we see the acute phase of virtually everything there is to see.
Mm-hmm.
So it keeps you on your toes.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Even more exciting, another add-on to that was that aspect in the early 90s that you hosted, I believe, a live call-in show, a talk show once a week on Channel 43, this same station.
Right.
Before it was WFXB, WGSC, with Dr. Asbury Williams, I believe.
Dr. Asbury Williams, family practitioner, Surfside for a long time.
Right.
Had a show called You and Your Health.
Right.
And it was live, and it was 1 hour. And at some point, he interviewed me and said, "Gee, you know, you interview pretty well. Would you like to share the hosting?" And so every other week I would do that, and they'd start the cameras rolling. We were live on the air, and they'd go for 60 minutes, and they'd count down the last 30 seconds, and I had to have my spiel memorized so I could wrap it up just at 30 seconds.
I love it.
And it was just great fun.
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
Great fun. We never had any dull moments where we're trying to fill in the. As a matter of fact, we could have talked for another hour. And had more calls for another hour if we'd had it.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Lots
absolutely.
of people called in all the time.
That old studio there on Seaboard Street.
Oh,
yeah. Remember it well.
Yeah, and it was in a kind of a storage kind of building with thin metal walls, and so Biker Week, all through the interview, you'd hear the Harleys going by. And, I remember one interview I did where they were. The jets from Charleston Air Base were doing practice approaches.
Right.
And so every 5 minutes, this roar would come about 500 feet over and drown out everything we were saying. It was pretty neat.
Absolutely. The thrill of live TV, as you know, and of course, even now, anyone can walk in and walk out of here, but they were kind enough to let us in a little before opening up. You had talked about the emergency room, and I think from '89 to the early part of 2000, 2002.
2002, yeah.
So a good 13 or 14 years or so there in the emergency room. You segued into a new position there at Grand Strand Regional Medical Center in 2002.
Right, Greg. In the early 2000s, the hospital had reached a level of sophistication that it was felt that a full-time employed administrator who was also an MD was needed, and I'd been around for a while and had been the chief of staff, elected chief of staff, and so I kind of knew the workings, and my feet were getting sore from 12-hour shifts, and so it was a very natural thing for me. Emergency physicians of course, know all the other physicians because we tend to call them up in the middle of the night and say, you know, your patient is here. So it was a good fit. It's been 5 years, and it's probably taken me that long to figure out how to do the job.
And of course, the opportunity there, as you say, having interfaced with all the doctors throughout the hospital in your previous service in the emergency room, and and I'm sure even now in the role of interfacing back with the emergency room doctors as well as all the others, and making sure there's a good flow of communication between all the doctors and the administration. That's also opened the door for you to keep in contact with doctors all over the area.
Sure. And we're very lucky at Grand Strand. We've got a fine group of docs who are really intent on doing well. And I don't suggest that any other hospital is any less, but
Right,
Grand
sure.
Strand is the one I know.
Absolutely. A little more than a year ago, I think I saw that you got active in an entirely separate venture, something separate from Grand Strand Regional Medical Center. And is it Curalease?
Curalease, right.
Would you mind sharing with viewers a little?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting story. Back in early 2006, a friend of mine, Kenneth Wins, called me. Ken is an anesthesiologist who specializes in pain. So he had his own private practice, still has his own private practice, where he does epidural steroid injections and treats patients with chronic pain. But he called me and he said, John, you know, I have come across something that I think is very, very promising for pain relief. And he and I had been singing off the same page with respect to how should doctors approach pain. And it's not every doctor approaches pain the same way. And so, so he thought I was a natural fit. As it turns out, a fellow named Roger Porter from Loras had developed a laser for pain relief. Roger's not a medical guy, but he's an engineer. He's manufactured several different things, has patents. He'd become interested in this. He had done research, found out that most of the lasers on the market now, the pain relief lasers, were pretty weak. He found a way to strengthen that laser beam so that it really penetrated deep and helped with pain relief. So he had it manufactured in Italy, got the patent, got the FDA approval, and he had these nice shiny laser machines for pain relief out in his garage in Loras and didn't have anybody to work them.
Wow.
So he made a cold call on Ken Wentz, because Ken was a prominent pain guy, and something clicked. A lot of people make cold calls in doctors' offices.
Right,
Don't necessarily
sure.
get an audience, but for some reason Ken was ready to try something new. Roger brought his machine in on a Saturday morning. Ken brought in his 5 toughest patients, and they all got better that morning.
No.
Yes.
Oh, Lord.
So Ken was excited, and he still is excited. He is passionate about pain relief, and he studies it all the time. And he still is just bubbling with excitement a year and a half later. So it's an interesting thing. It's new, it's used fairly heavily in Europe, particularly on athletic teams. If you went into any Olympic training room, you'd see them. You wouldn't see them with the degree of energy delivery that we have. And so from there, we developed a practice. We haven't gone out and sold them on the internet or those kind of things. We really wanted to see how well they worked. And so Ken and I each have a clinic. Mine is in Surfside, and Ken's is up on 82nd Parkway, near the hospital. And we are treating patients and developing the clinical side of this device.
Tremendous, tremendous. You know, as we think about, of course, a lot of viewers, myself probably included, would think about lasers for burning and cutting things. How do lasers work and not burn you?
Well, you know, that's the very common, understandably, the common perception of lasers. You think of this very tiny, thin pencil beam that's very high energy, and it goes in and it's so much energy that it burns.
Right.
And that's what we do with lasers in surgery. They're so tiny and precise that they can make a little cut more precisely than a surgeon can with a knife. This is different. This is a broader beam, about that big around, and I like to think of it, instead of burning, it soaks that laser light deeply into the tissue. And laser light, all light, is a form of energy. And what happens is that we are literally dumping energy deep into the tissue. In the laboratory, you can measure the cells absorbing all this tissue and starting to do repair work. That's been shown. So what we're really doing is revving up those cells to do the things they're supposed to do, be it get rid of swelling, increase circulation, get rid of inflammation, rebuild tissue, those kinds of things.
That's fascinating.
It is. It's very interesting. And so I do my hospital as my work as my day job, and I do that 4 days a week, and then take 1 day a week off from the hospital and go work in the clinic.
That's tremendous. You know, and of course we think, is this something that could be found anywhere else in the country? Are lasers commonly used in a wide beam format? I understand that Roger locally has gotten the patent there, and I think you said he had it made in Italy.
Correct. Yeah.
And of course, are lasers commonly used to treat pain, or is this totally novel to Horry County?
Well, it's probably novel to this area. If you went on the internet and Googled low-level laser therapy for pain, you'd see a lot of products for sale. A lot of them are pin-light sized, and they're very low power. Ours are, increase that power by a factor of 10 or 100 or so.
More. Mm-hmm.
Right. And what we've done is substantially increase the energy delivery to the extent that if the people who do the academic research on this probably consider it to be a level of energy that would burn you. They haven't seen this yet.
Right.
So most of the other folks in the field are hesitant to deliver this kind of energy. We've shown over a year and a half that we can deliver it routinely and get nothing but good results from that. That's
tremendous. Now, if I had knew another doctor who's a pain specialist other than you and the other doctor, the anesthesia, is this something that I could get available in any doctor in the county, or is it special to y'all's clinics?
It's just our clinics.
Right.
A new kind of untested therapy like this is hardly ever generates enthusiasm among the other doctors in the community.
Right.
Because there's just too much of this floating around, untested things. And so we developed the clinic practice by advertising, bringing patients in, and then patients would go back and talk with their doctors. And so now the doctors are hearing the good news from their patients, and they're referring the patient to us. But you have to come to us to get this particular therapy.
And what kind of pain is treated here, John, or Dr. Charles? I hope you don't mind if I call you John early on a Wednesday morning.
I would mind if you called me Dr. Charles.
Oh, good. Okay, that's
7
right.
in the morning.
Yeah, that's right.
I can hardly recognize my own name.
So, John, when we think about that, is that pain that if I wake up in the morning and my lower back has a weird little tinge in the mornings, is that something that Curalease could do something about?
Exactly. Probably maybe 40%, maybe 50% of our patients are folks with back pain, sciatica, extensive arthritis of your back, bulging discs, things of that nature. And most of it has been around for a while. We'd really like to get folks in early on. If you were to have that pain in your back every morning for a week, I'd rather see you earlier on. It would take less treatments, it would cost less, and we would get you back into action. Most patients who come to us have already had a lot of other therapies tried.
Right.
They've had their injections, they've had pain medications, they've had physical therapy, and so we are really starting out in a hole, and even with those worst of the worst patients who nothing else has worked for, we do surprisingly well. Besides the backs, we take care of lots of knee arthritis, shoulder arthritis, carpal tunnel syndrome, facial neuralgia, trigeminal neuralgia, things like that.
Has there been a lot of, I know you said the FDA approval has occurred.
Yes.
John, has there been a lot of research into making sure everything's totally safe? As you said, I mean, part of the thrill here is that you're getting a good baseline, getting a lot of local support to make sure this is something you'd even contemplate, I guess, rolling out throughout the Southeast and throughout the country.
Right.
Not that you have guinea pigs locally, obviously,
No.
but you're really comfortable with lasers. You said you've been interested in pain and treating pain for a long time. Had you thought about lasers prior?
No, in fact, before I was contacted by Ken Wentz, probably had never heard, I'm sure I never heard of lasers for pain relief.
Right.
In terms of the comfort level with using these, probably the most important part of my comfort level is the FDA has looked at the device and has rated it in the category of very, very low risk to the patient.
Great.
In addition to that, I've spent hours under the beam myself.
Is that right?
So has Ken Wentz, so has Roger Porter, the
For
inventor.
pain, John?
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
For pain. And I have a little bulging disc in my neck. I have a little sacroiliitis. My family comes in and gets treated. My father-in-law from Florence comes over and gets his hip treated.
Sure.
As a matter of fact, he's recruiting. I had a patient last week from Florence. I'd heard about it from him. And
is that right?
And people drive over from Florence.
Let's say if one of our viewers in Florence or Lumberton and Laurinburg was interested, I should have asked you that before we started filming, John. Is there a good phone number that someone could call, or could they go online to learn more? And I suppose you've got testimonials or otherwise, some things online.
Yeah, there's a website.
Okay.
And the spelling is it's a unique spelling, but it's www.Curaelase, and that's CURAELASE.
Right.
CURAELASE.com.
Okay.
And there's a lot of good information there. There's some testimonials from patients who we've treated.
Sure.
You get a good idea of what we offer. If you wanted to call and just talk with someone about it, it's in Myrtle Beach, 843-497 5273.
5273, 497-5273. Well, obviously, as you know, and all of our viewers on a regular basis know, this is a non-commercial show. We keep it, but for something like this that has gotten recent FDA approval, it's kind of exciting that something like this is based in Horry County. The opportunity for Roger, the gentleman over there in Loris, to get hooked up with Ken Wentz, and Ken, having talked to you for a long time about pain management there, it's a pretty exciting opportunity for the Grand Strand.
It is, and it's pain is such a difficult thing to treat for all doctors. And the lucky patients are the ones who get some surgery or get some injections and get better, but there are so many people for whom there's nothing left but taking narcotics and being goofy all day. And it's so very satisfying to have patients who've been miserable for years have their life changed when they come in.
So again, you said you prefer to get folks in early. Let's say I have been having a lower back pain when I wake up, having trouble putting on my shoes or something. There's a striking, sharp pain. It's been happening for 6 months, let's say. Is that something that, if I've never gotten treatment for it, I'm still at a good stage to come in? And how would this work exactly, John? I just can't even fathom that.
Well, every patient who comes in sees myself or Ken Wentz first.
Right.
And although we don't do a lot of testing and MRIs and things like that, we want to make ourselves comfortable that we're not missing something dangerous.
Right.
So if we think you need an MRI or need some other testing to make sure there's not, a tumor or that kind of thing, we'll say, listen, we'll treat you, but you got to get an MRI first, or you need to see someone who can make sure it's safe first.
Sure.
Most of the time, if you would walk in, you're a young, healthy guy, and you would describe your pain, and I would say, it sounds very much like I can make that diagnosis, and I'm not worried about being in anything else, anything ominous. So I would go ahead and say, well, you've got some lumbar back spasm. We have a protocol for that. So many minutes under the laser, so many times a week for so many weeks. And then you would probably come 3 times the first week and 3 times the second week, and then maybe twice a week for a few weeks. And we'd watch your pain go away. And
the expectation would be that would go away. This isn't a thing forever. Not necessarily.
Well,
you could see patients, I'm sure, for a long time.
Right. Everybody has a different improvement curve. One thing that's important is if we treated you a lot, let's say we gave you 10 treatments in 1 week, you still need time for your body to make use of that. And so we may have a 4-week protocol for you and tell you, listen, you're really not going to see the maximum improvement until another 4 weeks go by, just so your body can make use of this. And we see that a lot. The other part about having to come back and be seen again, we don't make that part of the protocol. And so far, after a year and a half, only a few people have come back and said, Doc, you know, I need a tune-up. And it's just been a couple of treatments for a tune-up.
Right.
But any time now, we might start to see patients come back and say,
Yes.
Doc, it's wearing off, I need some more.
John, I hate to say it, we've run out of time. We'll have to get you back. There's a key question. What are the future plans for Curale's we want to get into? And so hopefully we can get you, or even the opportunity to get Roger or Ken. As you know, the opportunity for something to kick off out of Horry County and have potential big implications, not only for the Southeast, but for the country. This could be real. This could be very big.
It is. It's an exciting thing. It's an exciting thing.
Thanks so much for being with us this
You
morning.
bet.
That's
Thank
right.
you,
I'll
Greg.
see you about that lower back pain. Stay tuned to more Carolina People with Dr. John Charles coming up next. Let me get that number out, 843-497-5273. Or you heard him talk about the website. Go online there to Curale's.com. That's Curaelase.com to look at all the info, testimonials. I'm sure there's links to the FDA. There's real opportunities to learn about what all happens to get something like this out, born and bred right here in Horry County. John talked a little bit off camera about the great expansion plans, expanding throughout the state, even expanding into Texas. It's upon us, but it started right here in Horry County. The excitement of hearing his father-in-law talking about flying over the area. You know, hearing John talk, it's kind of like flying through a plane as we hear him off camera talking about the excitement of his three kids, his firstborn getting the Fulbright scholarship there and going over to Slovenia as second to entering her sophomore year at Wofford, and his son entering his freshman year in high school. The excitement's there. They're all involved, and of course his wife there down in Surfside as well. Everyone's making a difference in the community. Take a look online, Curale's.com.